I am so in love with our new opening. I could just sit there and listen to it on repeat.
It makes it two of us. Can you repeat it?
I did last week. So, hey, everybody, welcome to the In the Hot Seat. Joining me today, Thomas and I are going to have a great discussion all around privacy with none other than Liz Miller, which Thomas is going to give you a little bit intro in a few moments. But for those of you who are joining us for the first time, if you have any issues with the cycling on LinkedIn, some folks are still saying there might be some issues. You can head on over to Facebook or YouTube, where the streaming issue is or the cycling issue is not happening. And if you are a first timer to In the Hot Seat, welcome. This show is all about putting analysts and customers and experts in the hot seat to talk about a wide variety of topics that range all throughout the customer experience. We talk about technologies, trends, tips, even some discussions that might cause some debate. So we're all about looking at the customer lifecycle and experience from start to finish. We are in our second episode of an 8-part series, all focused on organizational culture and the customer experience. And Thomas, we have a pretty interesting show ahead, don't we?
Oh yeah. Especially if we are looking at the marketers' greed of getting into my data and using my data for their purposes. So this is a highly exciting topic, especially, side note, Jody is a marketer.
So, I'm going to try and keep that hat on to be asking from the marketing perspective, and when you weigh in, maybe have some debate with you, because I know how you feel about us marketers.
No, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. So most recently, we have this tiny little company there that recently renamed itself towards something that is so averse, to quote somebody else. They just got fined a tiny little $1.2 billion. Or was
there
it
seems
euro?
To be a lot of it was dollars. It was pretty big. I mean, we're the early parts of 2023, and already the fines are coming out. And GDPR just turned, I think they had the 5th birthday, right, on May 25th. So there is a lot that's going to be happening around privacy, more regulations, more fines that I'm sure will be coming, and quite honestly, some confusion, right?
About time. I mean, is it a paper tiger, or does it have teeth? Does it need teeth?
I'm going to refrain from answering that question until we talk to Liz.
Okay, then let's ask Liz. So Liz is a marketing veteran of 30 years. So it's hard to say something like that, actually. So she's focused on cross-functional team sports known the customer experience as an analyst. So her research focuses on the evolution of customer engagement, business demands, and what today's chief marketing officer needs to do, along with the rise of the chief customer and experience officers. My God, do we invent terms today? And she doesn't really, well, she does also look at trends that are shaping our industries, that are shaping content, shaping technology, and how that redefines brand security as well. So let's bring her in as I forgot something. She's an utterly great person.
I could hear you in the green room, Mr. Let's Go Bag on Marketers. So Jody, shall we?
I know. That's why I said I'm keeping my mouth shut, Liz.
Oh man!
I'm just gonna let the two of you at it.
I love it. Yeah, just be like, let's do this, shall we?
Thomas and I have enough discourse about marketing.
Discourse, I love it. It's like a promise and a threat. all at once when I got brought out of the green room.
It's fun.
Like, let's talk about marketing, shall we? Let's do it. What's up, you guys?
What's wrong with
Thank
marketing?
you so much. I mean, this is your second episode. I mean, hello, Players Network.
Well, second episode in our series about.
I love it. Oh, in the series. Okay,
in the
good.
Series. Yes.
Yeah.
So we are kicking off this series with like the heavy hitters, Liz. I mean,
oh gosh, and then you brought me on. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go.
we want to.
Let's have some fun
on privacy. Hear your thoughts on this.
Let's do it.
All right, Thomas.
Yeah. Well, the very basic one is.
Bring it.
Is it in these times, as Sven also said, my data is your data. Is it possible at all to retain a modicum of privacy?
I think okay, so there are a couple things when it comes to privacy. I think that there is, I tend to lean into the thinking of actually my colleague at Constellation Research, Steve Wilson, who I consider to be probably one of the leading thinkers of when it comes to defining what privacy is. Mm-hmm. And he looks at a very big area that we refer to as digital safety, which is very different, right, than digital security. Like I think we've always thought about clamping it down. But what Steve talks about a lot is when we look at this chaos and we look at these issues around things like privacy, when we look at things around data, privacy for an organization is really about delivering the best possible experiences with the least amount of information that we have to collect or retain about someone, right? Mm-hmm. How do we actually deliver that concept of having a relationship, right? Of having a back and forth, having a discourse, right? Mm-hmm. Having that conversation without thinking that is only possible if we run some psychotic data decathlon, right? Like we all, and marketers, listen, I'm going to pick on my own tribe just for a second. Jody, don't worry. I'm going to bring it back. I promise. But listen, as you said, I've been doing marketing for about 30 years. So I was like 2 when I started. And the thing that I've known, even before digital really took off, right, was that we have always thought for some crazy reason that there is some kind of data decathlon that is being run. And that if we get to the top of the tallest possible mountain with the most possible stuff that we've collected, that someone hands us a medal and is like, congratulations, Jody, you've won the data decathlon. You can now go execute anything that you want to. And we're not going to question it. We're not threatening you with budgets. You just go do it. So what do we all do? We're like, we're going to go run the data decathlon because I have to win. Because I want to actually be able to execute these strategies that I know will drive growth, that I know will drive relationships, that I know will drive profitability. I want to go execute these. When will you people leave me alone? Oh, it's going to be when I win the data decathlon. So I'm going. And so we've run and we've run and we've run and we've run. And we've looked to collect data from all sorts of different places. Some of them a little dark and nefarious, right? Some of them really good. Some of them really, really good. The problem is because we've gotten it in our heads that personalization and having that directed one-to-one feeling of a relationship depends on having the most and doing the most with it, as opposed to gathering the least and doing the most with it, right? So what are those, instead of asking how much of this can I put in a lake, swamp, I don't know, like cesspool, I don't know what we're going to call the data thing now. We put a lake house by it. It's going to look gorgeous. We're going to put some trees. We're going to have, it's going to be beautiful. Right. We're going to put 19 of those next to something that's called a brick and a flake and a thing and it's finally it's going to work. Right. So now we're all putting our junk into one mountain and we're all running up that hill. The problem being that our customer does not care where that data goes. Our customer already knows that we have, as businesses, we have so much intelligence, so much knowledge, so much data about them within our systems. They don't know, nor do they care that our systems don't connect. Like, okay, so Thomas, average consumer, right? Like, don't think of any of us on this phone. Just think of like, you're like a cousin or someone, right? Like, think of a cousin who has nothing to do with technology. Over a holiday meal, has that cousin ever looked at you and said, you know what? I really love doing business with Starbucks. I mean, I just love doing business with them, but I only love them in digital channels very specifically. I only love them in demand gen channels because those demand gen channels collect the right data that I'm willing to give up. And so I really choose to only do business through digitally based, cloud native, composable digital channels. Says no consumer ever. Right? Can you imagine your cousin turning to you and saying that to, like, never, you know, but that's how we think. And so we're like, we're going to create customer journeys, but we get, at the end of the day, our customers just want to be treated like we remembered who they were after they introduced themselves to us at a party. That's what they want. We can't get them that because we're really worried about the big giant pile we've created for ourselves that's now coming out of the lake. Welcome to my TED Talk, everyone. Hi.
Well, and you brought up a really interesting point, right? As soon as you introduce personalization, because I think even that word really has different meaning to people. When you say personalization, the consumer's like, oh, dear Jody, dear Thomas, same email, right? That's the old school thinking around personalization. And unfortunately, some companies still do that. Right. And so
but here's the funny thing. So here's what you said. And I'm gonna instantly replay. I'm gonna do like a little contact center game here. Like, I'm gonna instantly replay your conversation. What you said was consumers think of personalization. They don't.
Fair.
Consumers don't think about personalization. Consumers are like, dang it, Jody, I called you 2 days ago and we had this conversation about my broken barbecue. Jody, why don't you remember that I, Liz, called you, Jody, the brand known as Jody, and talked to you about my barbecue, right? So that's what they care about. Or even worse, what they care about is I went online because I was checking my barbecue, and on my app, I said, hey, Jody, I've got a problem. What do you mean when I called in, you didn't have any record of me contacting you about this problem before? Because of course I did. I went through your chat, right? That's the problem. But then when you ask, so I do a lot of surveys, and I've done a lot of surveys for the past like 15 years of my life. I've asked consumers multiple times, do you value personalization in your customer experience? They're like, nope. Right. Then ask the next 10 questions. Oh, sorry about that, everyone. I promise you, I do have the phone on do not disturb, and all of a sudden everything just went crazy on my phone. So sorry.
You are in demand.
Sorry, players. Yeah. Sorry, players. Sorry.
Well, players. You're in the hot seat, so
I know I'm in the hot seat, so everyone's calling. Exactly. But so the interesting thing that happens is you can ask them, do you want personalization? No. Do you want to give a brand that you do business with your data? No. I hate you all. You're terrible. I never want to give you my data. You're awful. Do you want to know if you're a Samantha or a Carrie? Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, I have to know. Because I totally think I'm a Miranda. But so you fill out the thing, right? And you fill out your survey, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to find out. And then that irritating little thing comes up, like that little box comes up, and there's all this little tiny print. And it says, if you agree and you want to know if you're a Carrie, click this box. So I click that box, and then I'm like, oh my God, it thinks I'm a Samantha. Oh my God. And you freak out, and then you share it with everybody in your Facebook network. But remember, you don't want personalization, and you don't want to share your data with anyone. Welcome to being human, right? And that's the problem that we face with personalization, right? I want it all. I want it when I want it. And it comes back to the fundamental reality that we marketers, we love to talk about value and like value-driven approaches. And what we're doing is we're taking all this data so we can deliver value. And it is truly our intention, right? But we sometimes forget, and the enterprise, the organization writ large forgets that how people define value boils down to three things. Did it save me money? Did it save me time? Did it bring me something to my life? That something could be unexpected. That something could be predictable. But did it bring me something? Did it give me a little spin to win at the very end of that I wasn't expecting? Oh my God, that's great. That's value to a customer, right? But it always comes down to one of those three things. Ideally, you give them all three, but sometimes you can just give them one, right? Value isn't, I gave you a moment of delight. Paul Greenberg will be very happy that I said this out loud. It's not about giving people a moment of delight. Yeah, it is.
That's not a hashtag.
right? It's not about proving to a customer that you're obsessed with them, right? That is neither personalization nor is it legal in a lot of states,
Yeah.
right? So when we talk about things like privacy and we talk about things like personalization at the same time, we actually have to take a step back and identify for what purpose, for what reason, why are we executing either of those things? Because those are going to be very different conversations. If we are executing privacy because there is a regulatory demand for it, we're not necessarily going to be able to deliver on those personalization strategies unless we believe that the reason why that regulation exists is because it's the guide rails for how people want personalization to manifest, right? And so when we start to connect the two conversations as a strategy rather than a point of execution and a checkbox, that's when we really start to see things hum.
Now there's, as we are on this thread right now, so there are studies galore around that say adhering to privacy regulations cost me business. In how far does that come into the picture as well? Because then there's
Right.
this other regulation, especially for public companies, where there is this kind of obligation to the owners who probably want
Right.
profit.
So my question is usually, and I've had plenty of conversations with both public and private brands that firmly believe that. Like there was that time period, remember, I mean, Jody, you'll probably remember this like acutely, right? Remember when everyone was convinced that GDPR would be the end of their business?
Yes.
And they were like, oh my God, if I become GDPR compliant, I won't have a business tomorrow. And so we take all of the lobbying bodies and we spend a lot of money lobbying governments across the EU to ignore GDPR. Okay, here's the problem. No one bothered to ask, well, why do you think your business is going to go away? I was dumb enough to ask a lot of those questions. And I asked brands who were freaking out
and
saying, it's because email and blast email has worked. And so then you ask the next question, well, what do you mean it's worked? Like, how has it worked? How have you quantified working? Well, because when I send out an email, I get a lead. And what I am compensated for, what I am responsible for are leads, not successful leads, not qualified leads, not leads that are going to go anywhere.
Just
but what I need to get, right? What I need to get are leads. It is no different than the muscle memory of hosting an event at a convention and putting out a fishbowl. And if you put out a fancier fishbowl, more people were going to put their business card into the fancy fishbowl, right? But if you put out too small of a fishbowl, no one wanted to put their card in the fishbowl. So what then happened? Marketing got penalized because they didn't get enough leads, because we decided to call all the cards in the fishbowl a lead. It's no different than what we did with digital. It's the same muscle memory. So what businesses have learned is your business didn't go away. The businesses that went away were probably businesses that needed to go away. I'm going to be really harsh and say that out loud, right? The businesses that capitalized on really unreputable, shady, now illegal data collection, data use, and data capture, customers didn't want you there to begin with, right? It's the same thing like with junk mail and snail mail through your mailbox. We didn't want all that stuff in our mailbox. So you made it illegal to send it. And what do customers now want? Do you want to know what the things that people respond to the best right now in marketing and marketing tactics? Jody, can you guess?
I don't know.
It's actually driving one of the largest investments and the largest category growths in marketing technology today. Nope.
Well, I'm like, wait, this is a big question, and I'm trying to isolate like what's driving that.
That's driving media coverage and Twitter mentions, Thomas, not
leads, not leads.
Print technology, Jody. Technology that manages digital to print. Because you want to know what millennials are responding to in consumer circles? Print mailers. Printed mailers.
Oh, okay.
Really? I have not seen this.
That explains why.
Look up
that explains why my mailbox is so full of junk.
Yeah, I just get it and toss it right in the trash.
But what happens?
That's where it goes, Jody.
Right? They they have not been on the mailers before. They have not been involved in all of this. Their email inbox, of the 5 that they have, 3 of which are designated to junk, because let's all be honest with ourselves. Everyone's AOL email address, that's what you put down if you know you're going to get junk mail. So, right. So we now all have multiple email boxes. Like, let's stop thinking about like technologists for a second, or like you need to stop thinking about our functions. You just think about yourself as a person, right? You know how you manage your digital footprint. You manage it by giving specific people a specific email address, right? I'm going to tell you right now, if I give you my AOL email address, I don't want to hear from you. Like, that's just a hint, right? But what happens with the mailer? What happens with the mailer and the millennial? It cuts through the digital exhaust. It's now their email, because email is cheap and easy to send. So everyone sends it, and we mail merge, and we batch and blast, right? Email is something where we accept a failure rate of upwards of 80%, right? Because we think a 20% return on email is a high five moment. What is actually cutting through that clutter? Fancy Valpak. It's these beautifully printed on beautiful paper, curated, exclusive mailers, and they're gorgeous, but it's basically Valpak, and it's super fancy. There are videos on TikTok of people opening up Fancy Valpak. Who knew?
So I'm going to assume, this is B2C versus B2B in terms of
let's talk about B2B.
wave, right?
Let's talk about B2B.
Yeah, because B2B, like, why am I going to give you my personal home address from a business sense now that we're all virtual, right? You need to be sending me something that is
great. Ask me that. That's great, Jody. When we were in lockdown and a vendor you wanted to do business with said, you know what, we're going to send you a little gift. Could you give us your mailing address, because we're going to send that to you? At any point in that exchange, did you say no, because I don't give out my physical address because I'm fully digital? Or did you think to yourself, I'm going to get me a bottle of wine. Bring it, baby.
I was very
Here's
selective.
My address. You can ship it.
I was very selective with who I chose to do that with. Yes.
But you did it.
I did, yes.
You did it, right? So the reality is that idea of I got something, I was very selective. So you said the right words, right? I was very selective. You decided when, where, and how you were going to extract value from the person who asked you the question. That's the data exchange.
Now we had a bunch of very interesting words in combination, or in a couple of sentences. So there was this thing of the private email address, which in contrast to the business email address, which instantly leads to which part of my identity are you talking to? And the same with the private email address. So what's the relation of all these terms when it comes to privacy?
Multiple
That's a great
email
question.
addresses with the same person, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's a great question, right? Because there is a difference between someone wanting to be private and someone expecting privacy, right? There is a fundamental difference, right? Privacy strategy, privacy regulations, privacy processes. Privacy can be regulated. We have to have our privacy documentation. We have to have all of that stuff. But when I decide what I am going to give you, what I am not going to give you, that is the signal around, do I want to be private? Do I want to have privacy, right? Let's use a B2B example. How many people watching this right now have ever filled out a form to receive a report as a B2B executive or a B2B? Okay. Bingo. Right. How many of you have 100% of the time given your absolute correct information every time you filled out that form? Wait, no, don't all hold your hands up at the same time. Oh my goodness.
How
really?
many of you have done that less than 20%?
Oh, yeah. How many of you have actually filled out a form and told me that Donald Duck downloaded my white paper and that Donald Duck lived on Quack Quack Way? Because I've gotten that as a marketer plenty of times on a form, right? We have always done this. We as people have always done this. This is not new because of GDPR. This is not new because we live in an age of AI. We have always done this. How many people are old enough to remember filling out a card to enter a sweepstakes?
Ooh,
Unfortunately.
I won't answer that.
Okay. How many people who filled out that card only gave the one piece of correct information so that on the chance you won, they could reach out to you?
Well,
Same thing. It's the
pro-
same thought process.
Mhm.
It's the same muscle memory, right? This isn't new. We want to act like it's new because then we can come up with something to solve the new thing, because we haven't been able to solve that problem of people not wanting, of people and individuals deciding what is private versus what can they live with being part of that privacy conversation. What is my identity versus what is my identifier? I know what my identity is. My identifiers are something that a brand assigns to me that I can manipulate because I know what the systems are, but the average consumer cannot, right? But we're always making that, like, whether people are aware of it or not, they are making that subtle difference between, okay, do I want to add this to my identity that I want to keep private, that I want to keep secret, that I will then decide who gets to see that. But I'm also then not only deciding who gets to see it, but what they get to see. It's a multi-pronged conversation.
Do you really decide that? Because I mean,
Yes.
to be honest, I don't, and I'm probably not a part of a minority here. Who reads all those privacy statements that in
Of course
some
not.
very faintly visible font somewhere on page 347 or beyond
Right.
says something, whatever you give me, you consent to, well, me collecting even more and then selling it off to half a gazillion of partners.
Oh, yeah.
So do I decide anything at all?
Well, you
the
can
customer?
decide that you want no control over it, right? Or you can decide you don't want that product or service because it's asking too much. If you don't care and you just want what you want when you want it, which is like 90% of consumers, of again, Jody, to be very specific, B2C consumers, right? You're going to do it. But all of a sudden, you're going to have something that's like, ooh, that it makes you aware that you had to give up something extra that you weren't expecting to give up, and you're going to snatch that information back. You're going to demand that you get it back, which is where the regulatory issues come up. Let's use the example of generative AI. It's a little thing. I don't know if anyone's heard about it. It's this thing that's out there right now. Has anyone stop me?
No, I actually haven't heard about it.
Okay. Let's just call everything GPT and call it a day. Anyway, we can just log off right now. I'm going to call it this in the hot seat GPT.
Okay.
We're good,
check.
right? Okay.
Hash mark.
We're done. Hashtag. Call it GPT.
Why did I say hash mark? Hashtag.
Hashtag call it GPT. So in like October, so before OpenAI unleashed ChatGPT onto the unsuspecting masses, in that September-October time period, do you remember when everyone was posting those like awesome avatars of themselves where it was like, I'm Thomas, but I'm also an astronaut. So I'm doing research from space. And it was like, you could have chosen, right, Lensa stuff, right? Where everyone all of a sudden was doing this. You had droves of people signing up for Lensa, uploading their pictures, seeing all the different things that could be created, and then choosing to pay the $4 for the 4 best avatars that the big diffusion model created, right, of your avatar. And it was so great and it was so awesome. Oh my God, you got to try this. And people were sending invitations. You got to do it. And then all of a sudden, right around like between Halloween and like Thanksgiving, all of a sudden the headlines started coming out of, hey, has anyone read the fine print of Lensa? Hey, did you guys know that the pictures that you uploaded are your data? That's your data. That's your property. And you can go to Lensa anytime you want and say, give me back my property. You can't use my property anymore to create these things. But did you know that the artwork that it created is not your property? And that $4 that you spent was actually a rights management agreement so that you had the rights to use those 4 images. But all of the 50 images the model created actually belong to Lensa. So is that them taking your data, your information, Some people argued it was, but
Mhm.
according to their T's and C's, you had already signed that away. You
It's
had
at least a
assigned
dark.
away,
Mhm.
right? Because what was their property was the artwork that was created, not
Mhm.
your image,
Yeah.
right? Now, they specified we're not going to use this artwork to sell. We're not selling an image of Thomas. But what did they do with that image? They used it to train their model,
Mhm.
right? So they used that data to train their model. Here's the problem. 16-year-old girls fitting within the age requirement for Lensa were going and uploading their images, and the things that Lensa was spitting back were highly sexualized, highly inappropriate images. And people started freaking out because now the model was being trained that these young girls wanted to look more mature. They wanted to look like these overly sexualized women. And that's how the model started to get trained, because that's the majority of what was in the corpus of data now, right? The
Interesting
parents started
question is
freaking out. Everyone's
how it
right.
created them in the first instance. Yeah. But
How it created in the first instance, but also the privacy issue is how far into AI training does privacy reach?
Yeah.
Because technically you signed away your rights to the created art.
Yeah. Let's talk
That
a bit.
became the corpus of data.
Let's talk a bit of dark patterns there. Legitimate,
Talk about
legal, dark patterns, hiding the real purpose and intention.
But were they hiding it?
Yeah, well,
That's the question. Were they hiding it?
Yeah, in 300 pages, plus minus.
But it was still available. You could have
Yeah,
still read it.
Yeah, it's lots of legalese that probably 95% don't even understand unless they are lawyers.
But so then, gosh, let's solve that problem, right? Because you're right. There was 300 pages of legalese. You shouldn't have something like that. So you know what? Let's solve that problem. Let's, I don't know, create a piece of legislation. Let's call it, just for funsies, CCPRA. And let's say that in every single thing that you relate out about privacy, about data, and about can I sell my data, and can you sell my data? Do you own my data, or do I have to give you permission to sell my data? Can I take away permission so you can't sell my data? Everything you post about that has to be in plain, understandable, consumer-friendly English. So why does it still happen?
Because it's easier for the businesses.
It's easier for the businesses, but it's also easier for consumers. We can't blame it just on one party. This is kind of a big, giant onion that we've all created together, right? Both consumers, businesses, B2B, B2C. I want to get someplace fast. I want to have something cool. I'm going to give you whatever you want in this moment because I'm going to assume that there's a legal recourse that happens somewhere else. Then what happens at the company?
Yeah, but the legal recourse happens only if someone initiates it. And that's the problem of the fast past years of GDPR, where this tiger appeared quite truthless.
Yeah, but 1.3 billion, tack that on to 12.7 million to TikTok. And keep in mind, this 1.3 billion fine that's been levied by the EU comes after a $275 million fine that happened at the end of last year. The fines are backing up now.
Yeah, finally.
Will Facebook just go ahead and but here's the thing: will Facebook just pay the fine? Yes. It's like less than 0.05%.
Yeah, well, this can rack up to 4%. But the ugly part with it is that even the authority that should have enforced it needed to get forced to start enforcing it.
Right.
So,
well, the big names are the ones that are hitting the news. But if you follow the tracker, because I'm a nerd and have the little tracker bookmarked, and look at the fines, right? I mean, you're talking. It goes down to a personal level. People are getting fined, and I think the realization is starting to settle in that it's not just the company that I'm working for and I'm hitting send as an entity of a company, but because I'm the person, I'm also personally responsible as well. So when you look at that tracking website, it's a little scary. I mean, when you put your marketer hat on, you're like, oh, I got to rethink that strategy, and I have to rethink what I'm doing.
But oftentimes I think we rethink the wrong strategy, if I'm being
I agree
fair,
with you.
right?
Yes.
Because I think we rethink the wrong strategy. We rethink the data strategy. We're not rethinking the content strategy, because the reality is, in a lot of these emails, the reason why we call them junk isn't because they were sent. The reason why we call it junk is what appears in the content of the email. Like if I send you a completely irrelevant, out of context, garbage email that doesn't save me money, doesn't save me time, or doesn't bring me something back in my life, right? If I don't hit one of those three things, and you sent it to me 10 times this week, I don't care how many times I said yes that you could send me emails. I don't care. I'm not going to open the email. In fact, if you keep doing it, I'm going to complain to someone about it. And the reality is that, especially when we're talking about email, like if we just zero in on what's happening with, like, with GDPR and emails, if we ran our companies the way we run email strategy, we'd all be out of business. Okay, because email is still a place where 80% failure rate is totally okay. Now, because we're marketers and we're awesome, we turned it into 22% success rate, right? Like we're like, oh my God, I've got a 20% open rate. That means you have an 80% unopened rate, right? Like there's a reality there. Like, but we don't focus on that because we're like 20% open rate. Woo! Like we get fired up over that, right? Because remember, like industry standard used to be like 12. And we were like, we're going to raise this to go from 12% open rate to 20% open rate. Oh my God. And we did a presentation on it. We made all of our senior leaders listen to it. And then we went and did the horrible thing of convincing our CEO that it was an honest to God, legitimate metric. And we're like, oh my God, email open rates are through the roof. They're at 23%, everyone. That's a 73% failure rate.
Well, let's not forget that you're counting auto opens as well.
So if Outlook accidentally expanded your email, that's a win. Reddit, yeah, opened. It just so then what did we do? We got ourselves in the trouble of attribution, because that didn't suck at all as a marketer, right?
Okay, you're really bringing up a lot of terms that are just
like
making me cringe.
Right, we're just nah. So, but it's like, but because we went down this path of like, we went through this era, and admittedly, like again, if we're honest about the history of our people, we have to be honest about the fact that there was a very long time in the world of marketing where we didn't want anything to be measured. And we didn't want to be able to tie back that intelligence. We didn't want to look at things like data, because, and I used to say it. I mean, I'll admit it. I would be like, yeah, I went into marketing because I don't like to add. Right? Like I was like, yet, what did I have to do? Knowing that what do I use the most? When I look back at my college career and think to myself, what are the 3 classes that I use probably on a daily basis more than I ever thought I would? One of them is my statistics class. I took statistics to just get it off the ledger, but I'm telling you, as a marketer, it's one of the things that I use almost every single day is that knowledge from my statistics class. So statistics, numbers, data have always been part of the marketing fabric, dating back, for me, 30 years. It's always been part of that fabric. But we just didn't have a way to articulate the success metrics around that. So we created some. And those have come back to bite us in the rear end pretty significantly. However, what we as marketers and what we as sales people and what we as service people know, and we know acutely and we know really well, is that what we are doing at our customers, to our customers, is not working in the ways that we wanted them to be. So we've got to find someone to blame. Who's the easiest person to blame? The CIO. They're the land of no. They won't let us do the stuff we wanted to go do. Let's go build a shadow stack, right? Like, so we go and do all these things. So when it comes to things like privacy, it almost becomes impossible to have that enterprise-wide conversation around what is privacy for us, right? Like, how many organizations have had that conversation where you've brought all of your stakeholders together? Bring IT, bring CISO, bring head of sales, bring head of service, bring head of marketing. Get that team around a table and say, here is our unified, articulated, clear, specific definition of what privacy is, that includes legal, that includes the land of known compliance, that we all agree to. And how does that articulation impact our capacity to do our jobs, which is drive durable, profitable relationships with our customers. And if you can't do one without the other, you got to redefine what's going on up here with privacy.
Yeah. Do you have a good example of this statement?
No, because it's going to be different for every single organization.
Yeah, well,
it's not, but it's not but you're diminishing privacy to a document. You're diminishing privacy to something that can be written up, templated, and applied to another organization.
No,
you have to have the conversation about what comes into it and what do you want to get out of it.
Yeah.
Right? Why is privacy part of your brand? Why is privacy part of what you are delivering? Right? And you have to be able to articulate that through answering the fundamental question that no one wants to ever answer, which is, what is it that a customer comes and buys from you that they cannot buy from anyone else? It's never your product. It's never your product.
No, it's not the product. No,
well,
there is no unique product around.
And there is no answer of customer experience because you have to articulate what that is. You have to articulate what customer experience is. You have to articulate what privacy is. If you don't have that shared definition that encompasses all of the regulations, all of compliance, all of legal, you don't get to have a strategic conversation about how it changes.
And here comes the next wrench for that conversation. So it probably should include what the customers expect and
well, everything. And we always, God, they're irritants. So let's put an AI to funnel them out.
Oh.
Well, we have
okay, easy.
Right, we have to go back to the fundamentals, though. Of getting the customers to say, "I'm willing to give you that information." I mean, going back to the very first conversation point when you were talking about the survey, right? We have trust that we still have to build up, and I think we're doing a much better job of it, right? We're ungating we're ungating a lot so that people begin to look at us as thought leaders and educational and this company knows their stuff. I'm going to give them more of my information so in return I learn more about them. But we still have a ways to go.
We do have a ways to go because what we haven't done is translate what nonverbal communication looks like in digital. Right. And I think that we're very used to doing that face to face and in kind of old, like in the olden days when you could just walk into the shop and tell Mr. Jones what you wanted. Like, and he pulled out the little card that was like, I know Jody comes in every Tuesday. Like the story I give is of my grandmother, right? My grandmother grew up in Kansas. And when my grandfather had an opportunity to move to Seattle, they picked up the family. They moved to Seattle. My grandfather worked in the oil industry, and she was the biz, right, in Sedan, Kansas. So she could walk into the Woolworths, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, Mrs. Miller! Oh my God, here's all the things we have for you." And well, she walked into the Woolworths in Sedan, Kansas, and announced to the nice man behind the counter, "I am Elizabeth Miller. I am Mrs. Miller. I am here for my order." And that poor guy was like, "What the F? Who are you?" Right? But we still behave like that, right? But we do it digitally, right? But what did that guy behind the counter do? That guy behind the counter called the store manager in Sedan and was like, "Who is this crazy woman, Mrs. Ernest Miller? And why did she walk into my store thinking I'd have her order ready?" Right. And so he's like, "Oh, it's because this is what she orders every week. And so you should have this ready." And so when she went in the next week and did the same damn thing, because my grandmother was stubborn, she got her order. And that meant she kept going back to Woolworths every single time because that guy called someone in Sedan, Kansas. We have to figure out how to turn all the digital exhaust that we've created for ourselves and understand the difference between verbal and nonverbal communication. A click isn't just a translation into one thing. It can mean a whole lot of things when we tie it all together. So we're super focused on how the AI can do our jobs for us. What we haven't been super focused on is how can AI help us craft a better privacy model and then deliver that back for a bi-directional conversation so that we're growing our identity with every single interaction, with every single moment. And that that definition of what Thomas's identity is and what identity I want to give you, that is something that's progressive and growing and living and constantly evolving, as opposed to it's a file type with an identifier name that I can pull out of this system right here.
Wow, are you bringing up topics right at the top of the hour? I'm like,
Yeah.
there's so much that I want to go into that onion. Part 2. We need part 2, Thomas.
Yeah, we really need to take 2. So because I mean, this can go on forever. So still, this is out of time for today. So and it is not only that Liz survived the hot seat. So
have you guys noticed that my glasses keep fogging up too?
I'm right now worried about the seat, whether it survived you. No, not the one you're sitting in, the hot seat, I mean.
Oh, you guys are really nice. Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So
I had fun. Hopefully you guys did too.
I always have fun talking to you. We have so much more to talk about, Liz. We gotta gang up on Thomas.
Well, if there's anybody who thinks he could compete with Liz, so let us know. Then we'll prepare a seat for this person.
Gauntlet thrown. I know a lot of people that can step to this, so don't worry.
Well, make us know.
You've seen what happens. You've seen what happens at analyst summer camp, Thomas. I mean, we all get into it. We have fun.
Yeah. So tell us your specific candidate, maybe Holger.
I love it.
So
I couldn't do that to Jody. I'm sorry. I can't. Jody, I really like you.
You Germans. Oh man.
Oh God, that's way too much German. No, that is way too much German. I'm fairly certain that's like not allowed digitally anymore.
So before we banter too much, so this has been our today's episode. Thanks so much for everybody who is still there, and thanks so much to Liz. I'm Thomas Wieberneit.
And I'm Jody Spencer. Thank you for tuning in. And as Thomas said, if you think what you have to survive the hot seat, let us know. We'd love to talk to you. Thank you so much, Liz. That was a great day.
Thanks, you guys.